First off, for those subscribers who don't know me, my name is Craig. I've been working on cars since, well, as far back as I can remember. My dad was really big into 64 Ford Galaxies. And before that, he was into Model A's, so he evolved from the Ford Galaxies to the Model A's. My first car was a 55 Chevy that I bought for $100 and then spent the next 6 months to 2 years trying to make it run. Ended up giving up on that project because when I was down at the Auto Tech Center, they had a 64 Ford for sale there that had an AM/FM radio in it with a reverb, and it was a Galaxy 500 XL with a 390 in it. So I was talking to my dad, and I'm like, "Hey, are you still looking for that stereo for your Galaxies?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "I found an AM/FM with reverb for $100." So he goes, "Okay." So he writes me a check. I said, "Make it out to the location center," where the car was, of course. I went down there, bought the car, drove the car home, and pointed to the car and told my dad, "Your radio's in that car." So basically, I got myself a free car. That was probably my first good acquisition. I drove that car for quite a while. Working on it as I went through that car, I probably learned 90% of my mistakes on. I found, actually, you know what? It had a 352 in it, and it had the column where you put it in park and you could slide the steering wheel over. And we changed it to a 390. And then we tried to do a blow-up test. I think Cletus does a lot of this kind of goofy stuff. We actually drained the oil from the motor, and we filled it with water. We threw a brick on the gas pedal, and we walked away. And we didn't turn it off until the police came by and told us we had to shut it off, and which we did. The next morning, I was going to pull the motor out and put the new 390 in it, and I hit the key, and that 352 started right up. And I'm telling you, there was 2 hours of abuse on that poor engine. Anyway, that's kind of how I got my start, and that was the car that I learned that you need to index your torque converter and your automatic transmission before you bolt them together, or you'll blow the transmission, because that's what ended up being the death of the car. By the time I could find a transmission and get it in, I could find another car cheaper. And back when I was buying cars, we would spend $100 to $500. I think one of them I actually spent $40 on to buy the car. So another car was a really cheap thing to do. It's not like it is now where a beater costs you, $2,000 or $3,000. Anyway, I went from that to a 1963 F85 with a 215 aluminum V8, Oldsmobile V8, which now is running the Land Rovers. GM sold the rights to that aluminum V8 to Land Rover, and they've been using it ever since. Good, strong motor, steel sleeves. That's one of the first cars I ever had to do research on to figure out what it even was. I bought that car for $40, drove it home with no brakes, using the emergency brake as my brakes. Just out of fluid, bled the brakes, everything worked great. Motor ran kind of bad, so I ended up tearing it down and changing the cam and lifters. The lifters were all cupped, they're all like that. And then I put a two-barrel manifold on it because that was pretty much all you could get back in those days. Polished that aluminum motor all up so it was all nice and shiny. And then anything that wasn't polished was chrome plated. Really love that car. If I could get another one at a decent price, I would buy one in a minute. It was black, jet black, had it painted at Earl Scheib. Yeah, that's what we did back then. And you paid the painter in the body shop a little extra money, and they took care of your car for you. So it came out with a really nice paint job. They had to do it twice because whatever they had done, the first paint job, there were issues with it. So they had to sand it back down, not down to bare metal, but just sand down smooth and reshoot the whole car black. So it was charcoal black with a pearl white top. That was the first time I'd ever had a pearl. So that car lasted me for quite a while until I got married. Lost it in the prior relationship. See you, bye. Then the Nova that I'm spending most of my time on, I've had for about 25 years now. I've had it. I bought it back a while ago. Hadn't owned a muscle car for a while. I mean, I had cars that were fast, but not like this kind of fast. been doing work on it. Now this particular restore or changeover, this customization has probably lasted longer than 10 years, mainly because those of us that work on cars like this and we do our own thing, as we're doing it, we realize, hey, you know, I should do this and I should do that and I should do this. So that's kind of how this thing started its life. It started with a tiny little rust hole in the passenger side fender at the top, right at the corner of the fender and the cowl. And I took my pick hammer and I picked at that little hole, and it went right through it like it was butter, because it was bubbling and really bad. The car had been painted. I had taken it out right after I bought it, painted it, put rims and wheels and everything on it. But and we did a little bit of motor work to it. You know, you got to put the good holly on it and headers and all that kind of fun stuff and a cam. And so when I redid it and I picked the hammer, I'm like, okay, well, I just need to replace the fender. When I looked at the fender on the inside, it was unbelievable. And I'll post pictures of this as I go through to show you what I ran into when I pulled this fender off. It's just unbelievable how the manufacturers make these cars and don't make any way for the water to get out. But in this particular one, we've made quite a few changes. Not to mention lightening the front end. This car came in the mid 70s, I guess you'd say. They started coming out with safety equipment. It had what was called 5-mile-an-hour bumpers, which was basically 2 shocks on your bumper, so that if you bump into something at 5 miles an hour, the bumper would push in and then spring back on those shocks. So that's all been removed. That whole assembly on the front and the back of the car probably added close to 50 to 100 pounds of steel to the front bumper. And the front bumpers on these are not lightweight bumpers. These old steel cars have real steel in them, and those bumpers are, quarter inch thick, I want to say, at least, or real close to it. But they're solid bumpers. So that's kind of where I started. Was I bought fenders for it. I bought fiberglass fenders. My advice to the world: don't do that. Not unless you're racing the car, because I've put so much body work in these fenders to get them right. And if you've ever worked with fiberglass as a body person, you know what I'm talking about. Fiberglass is horrible to work with, because as you're sanding, if you're not covered up, you'll get little pieces, little shards of fiberglass under your skin. It's that fine of a material. So stay away from the fiberglass, folks. Stick with the steel, unless you're drag racing. That's a whole different thing. But because I've got them and I've started doing the work to them, I'm committed, and I'm going to end up, keeping these fenders forever. Some of the things that you'll see that I've done in the pictures that I'm going to post along with this video is I removed the steel support from the old steel fenders, and I've ingrained it and mounted it into the fiberglass. So you could actually walk up to the car, and if you're not, real sharp, well, I shouldn't say even if you're sharp, you can knock on that fender and it's as solid as a rock. You can sit on that fender. That's how solid it is. So that was one of the things that I really, really wanted to do, because when I first put them on just in raw form, they were really flappy, I guess you'd say. They were loose. So the steel really added support to them. And it ended up taking, 40, 50 pounds of steel off of the car just with the fiberglass. And all the work on the front. The front end, after I got done doing all the work to it, put it that way, because it's fiberglass fenders, fiberglass hood, and then removing all that weight from the bumper, the car sits up 2 inches higher now than it did with all that on it. So I've got to get 2-inch lowering springs just to bring the car down to the level it was at, and then I'm going down another 2 inches from that. So altogether, I'm going down about between 4 and 5.5 inches of drop. It's going to get front adjustable shocks, adjustable spring shocks. I've got the A-arm, tubular A-arms, all that stuff for it. It's all part of the whole process. Like I say, when I start working on one thing, I'll go to the other part of the car. Like right now, I've got to get the engine in, so I've got to steam clean the engine compartment. I've got to remove the fiberglass inner fenders, because I can't run them with the turbos. they'll be too close to the turbo and those suckers will light up. Not light up, but they will melt, and I don't want that. So there's a bunch of work that you learn, like I said, as you're going and you're doing these things, you make changes. Since I read up on twin turbo small block Chevys back in the day, and this is back in the 70s, 80s, maybe even the early 90s, the small block Chevy with twin turbos was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen horsepower-wise, because it wasn't all the time like a blower. So I've always wanted a twin turbo motor. Well, when I started building this motor, I wasn't planning on getting the turbos, and then I ran across the deal to get 2 turbos for a decent price. So I bought them, and I built the engine around them. The rings are gapped for it, and everything. I'll post pictures of everything as I go through here just to show you. But the motor itself is all, there are not head bolts, there are head studs. The crank has studs. Everything is studded on the motor. That way I know that it's built to spec. I'm not going to run more than 6 pounds of boost to the motor. I don't need to. 6 pounds of boost. This motor by itself is probably 400 to 450 horsepower wise, and then throwing 2 turbos on it, it'll roll down the street pretty easily at 600. No, I didn't want to do an LS swap. I like the look of the old school motor. She is getting a Holley fuel injection. The Super Sniper is going on it because it's the only thing that allows for blow through with a turbo. I didn't want to run these turbos through a carburetor because the adjusting is a little bit different. You have to buy a whole different carburetor, and by that time you're halfway to fuel injection. And most new cars have that fuel injection, make them easy to start. So I've got fuel injection, and behind it is a 4-speed automatic 700R4 to make it so that when I'm going down because when I drive down the freeway at 70 miles an hour, I'm running about 3,200 RPMs. So it'll be nice with this motor in it. It'll only run, or this transmission, and I'm sorry, I think I calculated it at I'm running about 1,200 to 1,500 RPMs at 70 miles an hour. So that'll be nice, and that's one of the main things that I want to do. With the fuel injection and the new motor, not only do I have to paint the engine compartment, but I also have to put in a fuel system for it. That's where this whole gas tank thing came from. I was planning on putting a fuel cell in it, and I was just going to mount it in the trunk, but when I put it in the trunk, I realized a 20-gallon fuel cell takes up a lot of real estate, I guess you'd say. So that's why I'm going to sink it down 6 inches into the trunk, as you're seeing on the videos that I'm working on. It does need to go down, and that'll give me a little bit more room. I haven't figured out the battery situation yet. Once I build the box and put the box in, I'll figure out the battery from there. It's easy to add to things as opposed to take away. And right now I got a big giant hole in the trunk floor that I got to get filled with this. But in order to do that, I have to learn how to TIG weld. So my MIG welder, which a lot of people made fun of me, a lot of the body work that you see I did with one of those $100 Campbell Housefield welders. No temperature control. The only thing you have control of is your amps into the unit. Either 20 amps or 15 amps, I think, or 30 or something like that. So you have no temperature control. So I ended up learning how to weld with that thing. So I imagine when I get a good TIG welder someday, that I'll really know how to weld well. But I've got to learn to TIG weld. So I figure, well, I'll TIG weld this tank things together. So that's where the Nova's at right now, is we're in the process of cleaning up the engine compartment, removing the inner fenders. The brake booster's off. I just have to take it out. I've got all new stuff for the whole car. I mean, like the engine, every single part of that engine inside, with the exception of the block, is brand new. Every bolt, nut, screw, everything on that thing is brand spanking new. I didn't go with any old used or older parts. I am going to break it in on the carburetor. I'm not going to break it in on the fuel injection, mainly because I know the carburetor. I'm not running the turbos when I'm doing it. She's just going to get broken the normal way. What's been done to the Nova so far, as you can see in her pictures, is we've laser etched the front turn signals. They say 383 SS. That's because the motor's a 383, and it's a stroke small block, so that's where the SS comes from, not because the car's an SS. 74 really didn't have. The only thing I had for an SS package was stickers. So this one's a little bit different. All the side moldings have been removed from the car. Everything has been filled all the way, welded and filled all the way back. The lock mechanisms have been removed, and those have been welded over. I am keeping the factory stock door handles because that's part of the look of the car. Turn signals moved down into the bumper. In '74, they were in the grill, and at Walmart, I found 2 driving lights that fit right where those turn signals were. So that's the only change really to the front end, with the exception of tucking that bumper up tight. And I'm changing out the lights to more modern lights. Right now, it's got halogen bulbs in it. Those are going to go into the Pinto, and then I'm going to run some LEDs with halos in the Nova. As far as the interior of the car, it's gutted out right now. I'm going to put in, I really wish I had kept the bench because, the benches are really nice. But with the console and everything else I've got to do it, I've got to have buckets. But that's kind of the gist of that. The back of the Nova, as you see in the pictures, has round turn signals. That's a 1970 Camaro tail panel. And I cut the, as you can see in the pictures, I cut out I cut the pieces out of the panel and welded them into the Nova. So now she's got two round tail lights, just like a Camaro would. We were looking at it one day, my wife and I, and she said, the square taillights really don't go with the round headlights. They really don't. If you had square headlights and square taillights, that makes sense. But if you're looking for the total focus of the car, they don't go. So she had a great idea. So I went with it, and now she's got round taillights. They are all LED, of course. I'm going to change them out. There's a new, more modern LED light that actually does the brake lights, turn signals, and backup lights, all LED, all more modern, and I'll be putting those in as time progresses. Everything that I'm doing to this car takes money. Everybody says, why is it taking so long? I don't know who has all this kind of money to throw into a car overnight. I don't. I had a family to raise and still do have a family that I have to take care of, along with my car habit. So some things go on the back burner. Now we're later in life, got a little bit more spending money because the bills are all paid. So it's time to put a little bit of money into the Nova. Actually, a lot of money into the Nova. But that's the story of the Nova to kind of get you up to speed. The windows, I've got Amazon knockoff power windows. They work well. You just have to put them in right. There are no instructions in a lot of the stuff that I'm doing with the car, but I'm used to it. You've got to engineer it all yourself. You've got to figure out how it works. The way that they have you put some of the things in are not the best way, I guess you'd say. Like you could see with the tractor video with the instructions to build the snowblade, it was a nightmare. But anyway, the marker lights on the side, those are all gone. Those are all shaved and smoothed. The car is ready for paint, but I did not want to paint until I got the motor work and transmission work done. The only thing, there's nothing worse than, and a prime example is when I was pulling the motor out, I had painted the bumpers just to see it. They're both two different colors. I'm playing with colors, but when I was yanking the engine out, the engine puller ran right into the bumper and scratched the heck out of the front of it. That happens, and that's why I didn't want to paint the car before I got the engine done. And I'm in no hurry. This is the thing that I do that calms me down, believe it or not. I've learned to channel the frustration into thought, because when you're doing this kind of thing with a vehicle, and you're customizing it yourself, there are a lot of places you're going to go, what was I thinking? Or when, prime example is I did the passenger side fender of the Nova, the fiberglass one. And then by the time I got to the driver's side, I figured out a better way to do it. So I undid what I did on the passenger side and redid it because I liked the way it was on the driver's side. That whole process probably added another 2 or 3 weeks to the build of the car, if not more. But these are the things that are going to happen to you, and you're going to get frustrated. You have to stop and think, and or ask for help, or talk to someone, or do something but you've got to make it so that you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy working on cars, don't work on them. You have no business working on them. If you get mad and throw things, don't work on a car, because you will get mad every day and throw things a lot. Working on pretty much anything like this, you got to be able to think on the go. A lot of what I do is I'll do something. I'm one of those people who can't sleep at night when something is on his mind. So you have to sit down and think it through and figure out what you're going to do to fix whatever problem that you have with your build. And that's why I say in my comment sections, if you guys want help with anything or have a question to ask, if I don't know the answer, I'll know where to send you, or I can refer you to somebody who knows. A lot of us don't know everything. Like I say, I do this for enjoyment. I don't do this as a job. Can I fix a new car? I learned how. There's a lot of things that you learn. That's kind of the rundown on the Nova. She's going to be done, when it's done. I'm in no hurry. I don't want to just throw everything together and then, have an issue later. There's nothing worse than that. This is not a TV show, and if you think it is, then that's on you. You can tell by the speed that things get done that I'm not working on getting to the end of the episode. The end of the episode will come, and that's why you see multi-part videos on different things. And like I say, I'm trying to do multi-part videos because there may be little things here and there that you'll pick up. A lot of what I've learned via YouTube and everything else is watch multiple videos, because I'm not going to be the total answer. You can go find that answer in a lot of different places, so go find the best answer for you. It's like TIG welding. I lost my manual for the TIG weld, so I don't know how to set it up. So it's been trial and error for 2 weeks. And I'm sitting there welding on stainless, and it's going along. The beads are great. Everything's going great. And I'm like, why can't I do that on metal? Well, didn't have the machine set right. But once again, that's kind of the things that you learn working on cars, is you kind of wing it as you go. You fix it until you figure it out, I guess is the better way to put it. With the Nova, I have learned a lot about a lot of different things that I didn't know about. Building engines, I had done them years ago. Gosh, I think it was 82, maybe 81, the last time I had built a motor for a friend. And even then, I didn't do the short block. We sent it out to the machine shop, let them do it, because it's cheap enough to do. This one I put together because I wanted to make sure everything was right. Because it is a stroker motor, I wanted to make sure that there was no funky things. So I sent it out. It is clearanced and everything. I did not put the stroker crank in it. When I was doing my calculations on everything, I had parts all over the place and didn't realize I bought pistons for a 350, 30 over. I didn't buy 383 pistons. They're shorter. So as I'm putting it together, I'm like, wait a minute, something's not right. And then I did break out the gauges and find out I put the wrong thing in. So I got me a 350 crank, steel crank, of course. You don't want to go lightweight, and put it in its place. The 383 stroker crank is still in its box, as it has been since 1985 when I bought it. Actually, it might have been 83. It's been a long time. I've been carrying this crank around with me for years. But because I still have the factory Nova motor that's in this car and I am keeping it, I am going to put that crank in that motor. That's just going in the shop truck, so that'll be good. And now I got the dog leaning on his head on my tripod. Speaking of which, we have two shop dogs. I have two shop dogs. I've got my bull mastiff. He's about 167 pounds. They usually get around 200, 220, and he was big for a while, but they have a very hard time moving around when they're big like that. So anyway, that's for another video. But back to the Nova. The trunk has been smoothed out. I did start painting. I was going to start painting the car a few years back, and I had a Harbor Freight spray gun. Everybody's seen them. And I was over there starting to spray, and it was the old cup type because that's what I was used to using. And as I started spraying, the cups started leaking and dripping down on the car. So I'm like, oh, here we go. So sand it off, start all over again. Whoop, sorry about that, folks. Don't mean to kick you around. But anyway, that's kind of the background on the Nova. I'm looking at it, trying to think if there's anything else I've forgotten. Power windows, I put power windows in it. I put power locks in it, all aftermarket stuff. Everybody who's got the factory stuff wants too much money for it. Especially, now that I've taken it this far, it's not factory stock anymore. It's not, it was a survivor car when I started. I mean, the motors, everything is numbers matching. The only thing I don't have anymore that's not numbers matching is the transmission, and that's because I traded him for the 700 R4. He needed it. I needed that. Worst case scenario, I can put the serial number on it. This block was decked and everything and readied for the 383 crank. We did all the work, machine work that needed to be done to the block. It's been line bored with new steel main bearings or main caps. They're not the factory ones. They're solid steel. But what I did find out is when they deck your block, they take off the serial numbers because they're real light. So I had to restamp the serial numbers back on this motor, which I just put the serial number on it that was on the old one. This car will never be sold. My wife will never sell this car. She knows this car is me. She's kind of a car fanatic too. She has two and I have two. So then that's just collector cars. She's got the 67 Fairlane. I'll do a video on that one someday. And then she has that new 78 or 77, 76 Pinot, 78 Pinot that she's wanted for years, and I found one. So she is a car person, contrary to popular belief. She doesn't come out in the garage and work on them, but she'll come hang out with me every once in a while, which is really nice. She knows that this is my love. When I first bought the Nova for Christmas, she bought me the carburetor, the intake, and the headers. So that tells you, that she understands the car guy, I guess you'd say, and mentality. And I'm glad that I found her 40 years ago. But anyway, back to the Nova. That's kind of where I'm at with everything. I'm building the trunk drop for the gas tank. But like I said, these things take time. If you are going to run out there and think you're going to have your car done in a minute, you're not. I like to use Freiburgers and Vice Grip Garage, and those guys have really good advice. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it running and driving. This Nova drove right up until the day I pulled the motor out to put the new one in. And when I pulled the motor out, I've got to do the engine compartment stuff. But it was running and driving. In primer, it's got trophies, which I thought was the greatest thing ever. I went to a show at a Ford dealership, and it won a trophy, which totally blew me away. It's won a couple different trophies, one at the Ford dealer, and then it won one because they liked the work on the back of the car. Putting in those Camaro taillights changes the way the whole car looks. You come up behind it and then you're looking at it and it's like, it's not a Camaro because you know what they look like, but a Chevelle looked like that too. So it's like, what is it? So if you don't know it's a Nova, you wouldn't know coming up on the back of it that it is. But she takes time. These things take time. And if you think that you're going to get your car done in a minute, you're not. If you want to send it out and spend $50,000 to $60,000 to have a $20,000 car, that's your thing, then do it. If you don't know how to work on it and you got the money to do it, hey, far be it from me not to send it to somewhere like Kindig-It. I mean, I've gone down there and seen their work. Phenomenal. I've stolen some ideas from them, the way they hide everything, the fuel and the power and all that stuff in the cars. It's just phenomenal. A lot of what you'll learn from a lot of different builders, not just me, but everybody, is there are some really neat ways to do things, but things take time. When you watch a TV episode of them building a car, Kindig-It is a prime example. I'd gone down there 3 years ago and did a shop tour, and they were working on what is it? Diamaso makes it. Oh dear Lord, I can't think of it. But anyway, they just did the show on it last year, and that car was there 3 or 4 years ago. Nothing happens overnight. With them, it's a lot faster because they've got full-time help. And when I finally retire, I'll be the full-time help to work on my cars. But again, it's one of those things that you do it because you enjoy it, not because you have to do it. If you have to fix a car, take it to the dealer. Or in my case, I take it to the dealer, let them tell me what's wrong with it. I bring it home, spend half the money, and fix it myself. And you'll see videos like that on the tracks. The Chrysler 300, I replaced all the fuel injectors. Didn't know how to do it. Figured it out. YouTube, love you. But take your time on your project. There's no hurry to do anything. If it's a rusty old piece of junk, drive it. I mean, my first car, my 55 Chevy, anybody who went to high school knew my car, because when it did run, it was a catastrophe. We had to push start it. I mean, there was just loads of stuff. But I had that car, and then after that, I had the 64 Ford rust bucket. I mean, it was just a rust bucket, but I loved those cars because I worked on those cars. They weren't the best thing in the world. They were what they were. And that's just the way it was. The only reason that the Oldsmobile got as far as it did was I found a lot of cheap stuff for it because nobody knew what it was. There were very few expensive parts, and almost everything I had to do by hand on that car. So it was pretty much, an easy thing. But once again, getting the car running and driving is really the enjoyment of the car. Right now, like I say, my Nova's down, my Mustang's up, but the back brakes are bad. There's issues with it. The Fairlane's up and running, and she runs perfect. For those who don't know, it's got 42,000 original miles on it. It is a survivor car to the best. The Pinto, of course, is my $2,000 Arizona Pinto. Put a carburetor on it, and she runs fine. Still got a little bit of a miss in it, and I'll work through that as time progresses. Probably in the winter I'll work on it. But that's kind of to give you a rundown on me, my cars, and everything that's going on in the garage. I'll try to do a little bit of a snippet every week of each different car. The one that's got the most done to it is the Nova, of course. There is more stuff being done to it from end to end. I think the only thing that's left that hasn't been changed out is the rear end, and I don't plan to change it. I don't need to. It has freeway gears in it, and guess what, folks? It's keeping them. Why would I want to keep my freeway gears? Because when I'm going down the freeway at 70 mile an hour, I'll probably be at 1,200 to 1,500 RPMs. Most of the time, at least in my past, most of the time you get on it, you're out on the road. You're not in the city. And if you're getting on it in the city, you're asking for trouble. Most of us grew up on country roads, and we could let them loose out there in the country. So a 411 rear end gear was the worst thing in the world to have out in the country because it was good for the quarter mile. Then it was done. Not to say that we didn't have drag races back then, but most of us were so far from a drag strip that it would have cost enormous amounts of gas to get there. So we didn't go there. But that kind of gives you a rundown of me. If you have any questions, comments, do send them out. Do me a favor, like, share, subscribe to the channel. I am going to post a bunch of pictures. If you connect with me on Facebook, I think it's under Call a Nerd. I think everything's under Call a Nerd, my computer company, which is how this whole thing started. Connect with me on Call a Nerd, and you can actually see the Nova from end to end, every single picture, because back in the day, I took pictures, I didn't do videos. I have posted a bunch of videos on the Call a Nerd page, there's a Call a Nerd YouTube page. There's some videos there, but I think there's duplicates on on Papa's Custom Cars. But all the pictures are under my profile. So definitely send a friend request, and we'll get you in so you can see all the pictures. If you have a Nova and you want to do something crazy, feel free to shoot me a note. Once you do, if you're in the Salt Lake area, hey, you can hook up directly. I can come up and show you the different things that have been done to the Nova, so you kind of understand where you're going with yours, and I can help you work through some issues with them, and pretty much any car that you have that I've done whatever I've done on. Like I said, I've learned a lot on this car, and I've learned a lot in my past about different things. I've worked on everything from Volkswagens to modern cars now. I can fix fuel injection, so that's a new one. New cars are actually easier to work on, believe it or not, after you get under the plastic. But that kind of gives you a little background on me and my Nova, my pride and joy. With the exception of my kids and my wife, that's the next thing on my list. Of course, don't forget the grandkids. But anyway, that's all I have for you today, and I'll also post a video I built a snow blade for the tractor on Friday, and I'll post a video on that. Another nightmare, but anyway, it was good talking to you folks. Get on a little more personal level with myself anyway. Please like, share, subscribe. If you've got friends that are into cars, do me a favor, get them to subscribe to my channel. Trying to get as many subscribers as possible so that I can build this channel into something kind of neat. Maybe get some sponsors. Car parts would be great, but definitely. But yeah, definitely hook up directly with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.